New dragons! Aemon One Eye shows us his other one eye, and the perils of moving boundary stones. The streets of King's Landing are bustling this episode as we march closer and closer to war. For those of you new to these videos, this is a huge deep dive into episode 3, where we'll go over such topics as who this mystery woman is, what Daemon intends to do with Harrenhal, and a scene that is such a huge departure from the book, it will have consequences for seasons to come. Although this video will have tons of references to the book, there will be no spoilers beyond episode 203. So grab a drink and unfurl your banners, it's time to like and subscribe and get this show on the road. If you didn't skip past the intro credits this episode, those of you with a keen eye will have noticed 2 new additions to the tapestry. Just like season 1's credits changed from episode to episode, so too does season 2. The first is our poor dead Jaehaerys with his severed head on his funeral bed. The other of the dead rat catchers hung along the streets of King's Landing. So it looks as though new additions to the tapestry will be sown as the season progresses. The episode begins by foreshadowing what would become known as the Battle of the Burning Mill. We'll even see the titular Burning Mill over here. This little skirmish between 4 members of House Bracken and Blackwood doesn't happen in the book, but it's a good analogy for the greater fight between these 2 houses. The Brackens and Blackwoods have been fighting for centuries, and their feud has gone on so long that no one really knows why they're feuding to begin with. This echoes what Rhaenys tells Rhaenyra, that pretty soon no one will know what started all this mess in the first place. House Blackwood has pledged itself to Rhaenyra. They hail from Raventree Hall here in the Riverlands, while House Bracken of Stonehenge has pledged itself to Aegon. Their proximity next to one another explains this dispute over the boundary stones. What makes their feud even more interesting is that these 2 houses actually fall under the greater lordship of House Tully. In the show, Lord Grover Tully has not officially pledged to either Aegon or Rhaenyra, and Simon Strong says that the ailing lord has little to no control over his bannermen. This is especially concerning because the Riverlands are the most strategic area in all of Westeros, with its main garrison the stronghold of Harrenhal.
The Riverlands are the key to the war. Harrenhal is the key to the Riverlands.
This is why Rhaenyra and Aegon's small councils talk of its importance. Whoever controls the Riverlands can cut off forces from House Stark to the north, House Arryn to the northeast, and House Lannister to the west. Not to mention the riverways crucial for trade, weapons shipments, and transport that lead all the way to the Narrow Sea. This isn't the first time we've seen such a feud between the Brackens and Blackwoods. Way back in season 1, when Rhaenyra was doing her tour of Westeros in search of a husband, a fight breaks out between Lords Willem Blackwood and Gerald Bracken. Willem is based off Samwell Blackwood, who would go on to die in the Battle of the Burning Mill. A makeshift funeral is set for Sir Auric and Eric after both men died in the failed assassination attempt of Rhaenyra. Even though Rhaenyra has endured terrible loss, it is Rhaenys who suggests there is still hope to avert war. She rightly assumes that this assassination attempt was not the work of Otto and Alicent, but of younger, more hot-headed minds. Rhaenyra is too stubborn to entertain this idea of averting war, and she hasn't even opened up the mail that came from Alicent. But Rhaenys sows one tiny seed of doubt in Rhaenyra that eventually blossoms into her decision to risk her life and head to King's Landing. If Rhaenyra didn't order the beheading of Jaehaerys, could we not assume that Alicent didn't order Rhaenyra's assassination? If this is true, there's still hope for reconciliation. Back at King's Landing, green Targaryen banners are unfurled along the Red Keep. Since Aegon and Rhaenyra share the Targaryen name and banner, they differentiate each other by the colors black and green. We find a contemplative Criston Cole, now Hand of the King. We can see he has this specially made Hand of the King necklace, one which characters like Tyrion Lannister will wear down the line. Criston has gotten himself into a very precarious position, and no, I don't mean the ones Alicent makes him try in the bedroom. Notice he doesn't chastise these new Kingsguard as they lay around on the job. Either he's just a bad commander, or he doesn't want to rock the boat, considering these new knights are friends of the king, the same friends who drank with him the night his son was killed. For all we know, they have little to no training, as we'll see later. Aegon reminds them of their vow of chastity, which I'm not sure they even knew was a thing. At the small council, Aegon holds onto this Valyrian steel dagger, also known as the Cat's Paw, the same blade gifted to him by his mother upon his ascension to the throne that once belonged to his father, Viserys. It's no coincidence this dagger makes an appearance this episode, as when when it is heated, you can make out the Promised Prince quote, a reference to the Song of Ice and Fire, a prophecy from Aegon the Conqueror's dream, which foresaw the savior of humanity emerging from the Targaryen bloodline. In Season 1, Viserys, upon naming Rhaenyra his rightful heir, passed down this prophecy to her, and it was this prophecy he mumbled in his drug-hazed delirium the night he passed. So when Alicent heard the name Aegon as Viserys was dying, she thought he was referring to their son, but in fact he was referring to Aegon the Conqueror. Fast forward almost 170 years later, and this dagger would find itself in the hands of the Lannisters, who would give it to an assassin in his failed attempt on Bran Stark's life. It's this very dagger that becomes the weapon used by Arya Stark to kill the Night King. So there is a huge amount of history in just this one blade. With Ser Arc's mission of failure, the Small Council decides what to do next. The realm is slowly breaking out into all-out war, and Lord Tully has failed to control his bannermen of House Bracken and Blackwood. Lord Ormond Hightower marches north with an army from Oldtown, but he is months away. This just goes to show you how long it takes these armies to move, and just how important dragons are with their ability to travel vast distances in a fraction of the time. We also get mention of Aegon's youngest brother, Daeron, who we have yet to see in the show. At a young age, he was sent to Oldtown to be Lord Hightower's cupbearer. He also has a dragon, Tessarion, who is too young for battle just yet. From Casterly Rock to the west, Jason Lannister, the twin brother of Master of Coin Tywin Lannister, has been harassing the Blackwoods to the east. Jason was rejected by Rhaenyra as a potential husband, which may explain the Lannisters' allegiance to Aegon. By the end of this meeting, a plan has formed. Sir Criston will ride out with what men he can spare to turn the houses pledged to Rhaenyra to their cause, with the hopes of eventually taking Harrenhal. I thought it was interesting to see Alicent and Criston arguing with each other here, considering what they do behind closed doors. Prince Aemond will remain in King's Landing with Vhagar to provide protection, while Aegon will accompany Criston with his dragon Sunfire, much to the protestations of his council. Aegon has this aversion to being seen as weak, and such hubris may well be his own downfall.
I'm as fearsome as any of them.
But Aegon flying off to war is a short-lived fantasy, as we'll later see Loras manipulate him into changing his decision. Mysaria watches the dragons see smoke from the ramparts of Dragonstone. We caught a brief glimpse of Ser Laenor's former dragon with Adam of Hull last episode. Sea smoke, like Mysaria, is without direction, a home, which makes this the perfect backdrop for what Mysaria wants. Rhaenyra heard it was Mysaria who alerted the guards as to Ser Arc's infiltration of the castle. If it weren't for her, Rhaenyra would certainly be dead. As a reward, Mysaria wants a place in Rhaenyra's court, and can offer her knowledge on the inner workings of the Red Keep. Her motive? Punishing the Hightowers for what they did to her and those who served her, and her decision to side with Rhaenyra is based on the fact Rhaenyra is the only one who has shown to be merciful.
And only one of you has shown yourself to be merciful.
With Dragonstone no longer safe, Rhaenyra makes the painful decision to send off her two youngest children, Aegon the Younger and Viserys II, to Pentos across the sea. You may recall Daemon and Laena spent some time there under the hospitality of Prince Regio Horatus. This makes it all the more awkward when Rhaenyra tasks Rhaena to bring them there. This is the same place where her mother died. But as they await word from Pentos, Rhaena will accompany the boys, including Prince Joffrey, to the Eyrie, where he will ward under Lady Jane Arryn. House Arryn promised Rhaenyra an army in exchange for a dragon as protection. She'll get that dragon, but Joffrey's dragon Tyraxes is but a hatchling. Rhaena doesn't like the idea of being a glorified babysitter, but as Rhaenyra says,
I need you to be the mother to them that I cannot.
Rhaena, unlike her sister Baela, hasn't bonded with a dragon at this point, and thus she feels like she should be doing more, even though this is an extremely important task. Daemon single-handedly takes over the great stronghold of Harrenhal. Well, at least it used to be great, until it was heavily damaged by Balerion during Aegon's conquest decades ago. The skull of Balerion can be found below the Red Keep, and Viserys was his last rider before the dragon's death in 94 AC. Harrenhal has since fallen into disrepair, and only a small group of House Strong remain. This includes the current castellan of Harrenhal, Simon Strong, who governs on behalf of Lord Loras. He took over after the tragic deaths of his brother and father in Season 1. This included Harwin Strong, Rhaenyra's lover and father of Jace, Luke, and Joffrey. As Daemon traverses the dark and rainy ruins of the castle, we catch a brief glimpse of the main hall, where the Great Council met in 101 AC under King Jaehaerys to anoint Viserys as next in line. Daemon, donning his signature armor and blade Dark Sister, takes over the stronghold without any resistance. In the book, Simon Strong takes one look at Daemon's dragon and surrenders. However, the show gives us a little twist. Simon hates his great-nephew Larys Strong and implicates him in the death of Lionel and Harwin, so Simon is happy to side with Daemon and willingly pledges his allegiance. But what I really want to talk about is this woman. Notice how everyone cowers in fear as Daemon arrives, but she just casually strolls in unaffected by his presence. She is not scared of him at all. This is Alys Rivers. Her last name suggests she's a bastard. Remember, in Westeros, bastards are given specific surnames depending on where they were born, such as Jon Snow and Ellaria Sand. If you're curious what each region names their bastards, check out this map here. The book varies wildly just who exactly this woman is, from a common serving wench who dabbled in potions and spells to a full-on witch who bathed in the blood of virgins to preserve her youth. Rumors suggest she is the bastard daughter of Lionel Strong, the former Master of Coin, which would make her a half-sister of Harwin's. The show seems to be taking the witch route, implying that it was her who gave Daemon this dream of him and young Rhaenyra and an omen that he will die.
You will die in this place.
The book also mentions how youthful Alys looks for her age. She is supposed to be over 40, and there's even a wild theory that Alys is the Red Priestess Melisandre from Game of Thrones. The actress who played Melisandre stated that Melisandre is centuries old and would be alive during the Dance of Dragons. We also don't know what she really looks like at a young age, as this necklace transformed her to look like the character we see in Game of Thrones and not my ex-wife. It's also interesting that Daemon wakes up from this dream outside a weirwood tree. These trees were considered sacred to the children of the forest, whose green seers are said to have used them to see into the past, present, and future. With Alys seemingly looking into the future to predict Daemon's death, is the fact he woke up next to a weirwood tree simply a coincidence? Daemon needs Harrenhal, as it's the only stronghold in the land that can garrison the Riverland's 40,000 men. In the books, it is said that when Daemon takes over, thousands of men from the countryside were excited to take up arms and join his fight against Aegon, as they remember the fond times Rhaenyra, then referred to as the Realm's Delight, visited them in her youth. You might remember Harrenhal from Season 2 of Game of Thrones, in which Tywin Lannister and his men have taken it over to discuss what to do about Robb Stark. The taking of Harrenhal seems to be a grand gesture to regain Rhaenyra's trust. Last episode, we saw this deeply emotional scene between the two in which Rhaenyra questioned Daemon's trust.
Cannot trust you, Daemon.
Daemon has performed grand gestures before, like when he overtook the Stepstones in his brother's name, so surely taking the most important strategic location in Westeros will earn back her favor. When Simon tells Daemon that his liege lord Grover Tully is in no condition to speak and his grip on his bannermen are weak, Daemon says this:
People should obey their liege lord, whatever his condition.
If Daemon truly believes this, it means he will stick by Rhaenyra no matter what. With Harrenhal secured, Daemon plans on amassing an army before marching on King's Landing. Meanwhile, Criston's army has assembled and is ready to move when we're introduced to Sir Gawain Hightower, Alicent's younger brother. However, in the show, he's referred to as the eldest son. This isn't the first time we've seen Gawain, as he fought Daemon at the tournament in Season 1.
Prince Daemon Targaryen chooses Sir Gawain Hightower of Old Town.
And we all know what happens to Gawain. Gawain is pretty bitter and condescending toward Cole. Perhaps he senses what's going on between his sister and this commoner, referring to him coming from modest beginnings. Also, this guy just took over their dad's job. He'll even watch as Criston is given Alicent's favor, this handkerchief. As their army marches out, a raven eats the eye of Blood's decomposed body still hanging from the ramparts. At the Black Council, Rhaenyra faces increasing pressure from her advisors to march to war. They want her to send her dragons out immediately and burn all who resist, but Rhaenyra needs more time, which the others may interpret as weakness. Both the Vale and North have pledged men, but they're nowhere near, and Daemon can't be found. Marching to war now could prove reckless. These men even suggest taking over for Rhaenyra while she seeks safety somewhere else, with Rhaenyra calling this suggestion tantamount to treason. Rhaenys is quick to remind these men that their queen is the descendant of King Jaehaerys, whose reign outlasted even that of Aegon the Conqueror, conquerors. As Corlys and Rhaenys head off to war, one by air and the other by sea, they say their goodbyes, most appropriately under the hull of a ship. They discuss their two choices as heir to Driftmark, Rhaena and Joffrey, both of whom have no affinity for the sea, nor does Rhaena even have a dragon. Speaking of Rhaena, she says her goodbyes as she heads off to the Eyrie. Along with her are 4 unhatched dragon eggs, quite possibly the most valuable weapons in all of Westeros. These will become incredibly important as this war continues. Additionally, Rhaena becomes this sort of failsafe for Rhaenyra's bloodline. If they're all to perish, she needs Joffrey, Aegon, and Viserys to make sure her lineage survives. Alicent visits Helaena in the wake of Jaehaerys' death, stating that sadness is a condition of motherhood. Notice how Helaena holds on to this insect cage, a metaphor for her own life trapped within the keep and social structure it contains. But the real elephant in the room is Helaena knowing of Alicent and Criston's affair, something she wouldn't discuss in episode 2. Helaena forgives her mother, and I don't believe Helaena would tell anyone. However, the same cannot be said for Alicent's servants, who are under the control of Larys. Speaking of Larys, he comes to alert the king, who's now donning the Valyrian steel armor of Aegon the Conqueror. Some vicious rumors have circulated around the city. They say that the council wants Aegon to fly off to war so that Alicent and Prince Aemond will rule in his absence. Of course, Aegon can't let that happen, and thus decides to stay in King's Landing. With Aegon in King's Landing, Larys can manipulate him even further, and his scheming pays off as Aegon appoints him Master of Whisperers, essentially his chief spy. Among the depraved streets of Fleabottom, we follow Ulf White, who we saw briefly outside the Red Keep in episode 2. He's made his way to the tavern/brothel, claiming to be the bastard son of Baelon Targaryen, the father of Daemon and Viserys, and son of Jaehaerys. If true, this would make him half-brother to Daemon and Viserys, and uncle to Queen Rhaenyra. It would also make him something called a dragon seed. A dragon seed is a term used to describe the bastards of Valyrian descent, the people who came from Old Valyria. And because they have Valyrian blood, it means they can ride dragons. You can see how dragon seeds will play an important role in the war to come, especially since some dragons out there don't have riders. All this talk of bastards is especially interesting considering who is serving these men. That's Diana, the former servant of Aegon and Helaena, who was by Aegon and became pregnant. She was fired from her position by Alicent and given coin to keep quiet and moon tea to kill the baby. But Ulf's tall tale ends abruptly with a drunk King Aegon and his friends who offer to put everything on the crown's tab. A mighty gesture considering the city is on the brink of starvation from Rhaenyra's blockade of the Gullet. Aegon finds Aemond in the bed of the brothel madam, the one person he seems to find comfort in. Aegon mocks him for laying with the same woman who took his virginity. Aemond, however, is reserved, and instead of lashing out against his drunk brother, he keeps his composure. I guess Aemond has developed a thick skin after years of constant teasing. Back on Dragonstone, Rhaenyra cries looking upon the toys of her now gone children. She finally decides to read Alicent's note, which we can see closed with the High Tower seal. Now I paused it at the very last moment, and this is what I could make out. Rhaenyra, I write, lest the battling all the hours of, might also wish to the mother for, and along with the hope. This is clearly an Alicent who is conflicted, much like Rhaenyra. Perhaps Rhaenys was right and there is room for reconciliation. Gwaine doesn't seem to be much help to Criston as he informs the Hand that he and his men are taking a detour to an inn in the town of Rosby, north of King's Landing. Their trek along the open fields have left them vulnerable to attack, which is exactly when Baela swoops in on her dragon, Moondancer. It's a close call, and I was shocked by just how fast these dragons can move. Criston and Gwaine are able to make it to the cover of the nearby woods, with a valuable lesson being learned. Movement must now be restricted to the cover of darkness. Upon hearing of Criston's troops moving towards Rosby, the Black Council demands action. Lord Staunton makes his intentions known that he will be going back to fortify his home of Rook's Rest, which could be a potential target should Aegon's army continue north. Rhaenyra comes to speak with Mysaria, who's already busy at work talking up Rhaenyra's lady-in-waiting, Elinda. Mysaria is to become Rhaenyra's Master of Whisperers. With members of her council pushing for war, Mysaria is one of a few people she can be candid with. She believes if there is a chance war can be averted, she has to try, but this would mean seeing Alicent face to face. Any other method, such as a message, would be seen as subterfuge. Rhaenyra knows that if Daemon got into King's Landing, she can too, and Mysaria can help. She knows that the only place Alicent ventures outside the castle and can be reached alone is the Church of the Seven. Thus, Rhaenyra makes the perilous journey to King's Landing, risking her her life just for the chance to avert war. This does not happen in the book, and its change has serious implications for the rest of the story. Hiding as members of the church, Rhaenyra and her Queensguard, Sir Steffan Darklyn, make their way into the city on a fishing boat. It's kind of ironic that Rhaenyra and Alicent meet at the same spot the two talked as children. I was holding my breath if Alicent would scream when she sees her daughter-in-law beside her, and thankfully for all her sakes she doesn't. They first get two important matters out of the way. Both repudiate the claims they had any hand in the death of Lucerys or Jaehaerys. They also agree that neither of them have the desire for blood and glory like their male counterparts. If they can stop the war to come, they owe it to themselves and the hundreds of thousands of lives at stake to give it a shot. But this still leaves us at a standstill. Alicent believes Aegon to be the rightful heir, and Rhaenyra believes herself to be. Now Alicent reaffirms her claim that on his deathbed, Viserys wanted Aegon to be king. However, this was only how she interpreted it. Remember that Viserys was extremely sick and looks to be given some sort of milk of the poppy to ease his pain, putting him in a sort of delirious state. When he's talking to Alicent, he actually thinks he's talking to Rhaenyra, asking her if he believed the story of King Aegon to be true, his prophecy of the Song of Ice and Fire. Now Alicent thinks he's talking about their son Aegon, so when he goes on to say things like he'll be the prince that was promised to unite the realm, she interprets this as him choosing Aegon to be king. So when Viserys literally says, "You are the prince that is promised," he actually means Rhaenyra, since the word prince in its original Valyrian is gender neutral, meaning it could be prince or princess. Now Alicent has never heard of Aegon's prophecy before. This is passed down only from heir to heir, so when Rhaenyra finds her father use those words in his final moments, she puts two and two together to tell Alicent this was all some misunderstanding. And if you look here, Alicent wavers for a moment. Although she says there's been no mistake, she knows there has been. It's too late anyway. Otto is gone from court, Criston Cole is on the march, and Aemond is out for blood. Even if she wanted to do something, she can't.
It's too late, Rhaenyra.
We end on a distraught Rhaenyra knowing her last-ditch effort to save the realm from war has ended. We can assume that Alicent will leave Rhaenyra to go back to Dragonstone, but this meeting firmly gives, in my opinion, Rhaenyra the moral high ground. Whereas before Alicent truly believed her son to be the legitimate heir, now she knows the truth, and as far as we know, she's not going to do anything to stop it. It looks as though we are off to war whether we like it or not. But what do you think will happen next? Is Alys Rivers really a witch? Was that big change from the book a good addition to the story? I want to hear your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching, be sure to like and subscribe, and for more bad takes you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ThinkStoryYT. Until next time, remember,
Aemond the Fierce!